Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Danny Plugger. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Transit Association. I want to welcome everybody to the third 2025 VTA DRPT Joint Lunch and Learn webinar program. VTA is so thankful for this partnership and the opportunity to offer our members and the Commonwealth's transit community a deeper dive into public transportation's challenges, issues, and processes with insight from the experts. This webinar series would not be possible without the support, partnership, and expertise of our colleagues at DRPT. Today's program is going over GTFS 101, how Virginia uses transit data to benefit agencies and riders. As a reminder, our former programs are on VTA's YouTube page if you'd like to go back and review them. And as always, if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A and chat box, and they will get asked and answered at the appropriate time. A quick piece of housekeeping. The next Transit Service Delivery Advisory Committee is meeting virtually on August 27th. They are in the process of reviewing changes to Merit's operating and capital formula funds. So please RSVP via DRPT's website, and I look forward to seeing you at the meeting on the 27th. Now, this afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing today's presenters, Grace Stankus and Wood Hudson. Grace is a statewide transit planner at the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, who specializes in data analysis and visualization. At DRPT, she's worked on numerous data projects, including the Open Data Portal, which is fantastic. If you've never given it a try, it's been great. DRPT's Geospatial Data Hub, and the Coordinated Human Services Mobility Plan Update. Prior to joining DRPT, she was a GIS analyst at HDR, and she has a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning from Virginia Commonwealth University, go Rams go, along with a graduate certificate in GIS systems. Wood is a statewide transportation planning manager for DRPT. His current position involves managing the strategic planning team, which includes multiple transit planning studies and leading innovative projects, including the first deployment of rural microtransit in the Commonwealth. Previously, he served as a statewide transit planner with DRPT, and he has also worked at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, the Charlottesville-Albemarle Metropolitan Planning Organization, and most recently with VDOT. Wood holds a graduate degree in urban and environmental planning from the University of Virginia. So please grab your lunch, sit back, and enjoy a great program from Grace and Wood. Grace, kicking it over to you.
Thanks, Danny. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to kick things off with an overview of GTFS. So what is it, how it came to be, how does it work, and what are some of the benefits of GTFS? And then I'm going to hand it off to Wood, who's going to talk about how GTFS can be leveraged and some tools and resources that are available for you all to take full advantage. So first things first, what is GTFS? GTFS stands for General Transit Feed Specification. It is a globally accepted, standardized data format for public transportation data that contains schedule information and associated geographic locations of routes and stops, and it also includes fare, calendar, and frequency information. It serves as a single source of truth and enables transit data to be fed into a variety of different digital tools, such as Google Maps, Apple Maps, the Transit app, the Remix Transit Planning Platform, and the Connecting VA Trip Planner. These platforms all cater to a different mix of priorities and audiences, but thanks to GTFS, they all contain the same information. So the idea of including transit data in online mapping applications really began in 2005, back in the MapQuest era in the early days of Google Maps. A couple of IT managers working at TriMet, the transit agency in Portland, Oregon, began asking the question, why is it easy to get directions for driving but not for transit? Especially in a new city, you're getting around getting around with transit in a new city is a bit of a daunting endeavor. First, you had to identify the local transit agency and then find a route map and a timetable and locate the appropriate stop. And these IT managers recognized this challenge and started collaborating with engineers at Google to explore adding transit data into Google Maps. And a couple months later, the Google Transit Trip Planner was live, with Portland, Oregon becoming the first city featured on the Transit Planner. And then fast forward today, now 20 years later, GTFS is ubiquitous and being utilized by over 2,500 transit agencies across the globe. I think this global adoption of GTFS speaks to the clear benefits associated with using a standardized data format, but also how, relatively speaking, simple GTFS data is to build and deploy. This data is open source, and at its most basic level, it can be created using Excel, which makes it fairly accessible worldwide. So what about in Virginia? The larger transit agencies have been using GTFS for a decade or possibly longer, but up until about 5 years ago, there were some pretty big gaps in transit data throughout the state. In 2020, DRPT was awarded a federal discretionary grant and began working with Trillium Transit to provide technical assistance to rural and small urban agencies to build GTFS data and close these gaps. In 2021, once Trillium completed the initial build for these agencies, they began hosting a GTFS clearinghouse, which made these statewide data sets publicly available. And in that same year, DRPT partnered with Virginia Navigator to deliver a statewide directory of transit and human services providers throughout Virginia. And the Virginia Navigator is a great resource, and there was kind of this idea to build off of the directory by incorporating this newly built GTFS data. And so building off of that momentum, in 2022, DRPT was awarded another discretionary grant to expand our GTFS data and launch a one-call, one-click dashboard. And for this work, DRPT partnered with Agile Mile and continued working with Trillium on the GTFS side of things. And in early 2024, the dashboard debuted, officially named the Virginia Trip Planner. And within this trip planner includes a handful of GTFS feeds with agencies providing publicly available demand response service. And in 2025, we are continuing to build out the flex feeds with the goal of having about 90% agency coverage. And I just included this bullet here for what's next. Our hope is that this webinar will get the ideas flowing for new ways your agency can use GTFS data and how DRPT can help. So some of the benefits of GTFS data. GTFS static data provides a variety of benefits to the transit agency in their riders. Route and stop data is the foundation for Remix and other on-demand planning tools. It just provides a level of granularity that's useful for conducting accessibility analysis and determining areas with disparate service. It can also be used for before and after analysis, where existing transit services, how that's changed, and it's helpful for tracking any of those historical changes. And then enhanced customer experience is possibly the biggest benefit of utilizing GTFS data. It allows people to easily find transit information when they search online, and it enables trip planning applications to display transit service as an option for a trip. And then adding in vehicle positions and other real-time passenger information can also enhance the customer experience. Through providing live updates regarding scheduling changes or delays, either through mobile applications or digital signage. And this helps riders plan accordingly, which in turn can decrease wait times and provide peace of mind by taking some of the guesswork out of using transit. And then agencies themselves can also see the benefits of utilizing real-time through increased customer satisfaction and access to valuable on-time performance data, which can again be used for service planning and any other analysis. And then finally, GTFS Flex provides additional benefits by enabling zone-based services such as paratransit, dial-a-ride, or demand response to show up as an option on trip planning services. And so I included this graph. I think it really, or this image because I think it does a really good job at displaying the entire process of how GTFS data begins with transit agencies and then is ultimately pushed to the end user. So starting with the agencies, they provide a variety of service data in individual text files. I have more on this on the next slide, which is then packaged together and compressed into a zip file that can be uploaded as a URL to an online clearinghouse. And then once the data is in its URL form and on the internet in the clearinghouse, it can then be consumed by any number of trip planners, mobile payment systems, third-party applications, and anybody else in the general public who is interested in looking at this data. And so to get into a little bit more specifics, GTFS static is the first iteration of GTFS and the one most of us are probably the most familiar with. It is built from a series of comma-delimited text files, and there are 7 required text files that are required to complete a data set, but there are over 15 optional files that can be included to enhance the data that's available to riders and the public. I'm going to quickly run through these 7 required files just to give you an idea of like the meat of this data. And so the first one is the agency text file. This one's pretty self-explanatory. What agency? This includes basic contact information, the website, phone number. And then the next required file is a routes file. So this is a list of the routes that the agency serves. The third file, trips. This is how many runs does Route X operate on a given service day. Stop times, so what are the scheduled times that Route X arrives at stop Y. Stops, this is a list of stop or station names for a given agency, and this also contains the XY coordinates that are used to map the location of each stop. The calendar file, this includes information about dates and days of the week that the service runs. So for instance, I know of a transit agency that doesn't operate on Sundays. That kind of data would be included in this file. And then the calendar dates file, and this adds exceptions to the previous calendar file and is used to provide information about any planned additions or removals of service. So for example, if an agency is not operating on a certain holiday or they're adding additional trips after a sporting event or a big concert, that kind of information would be added here. And so each of these text files have a variety of optional attribute information. So for example, within that stop file, there are some optional fields that can be used to capture information, such as passenger amenities at a stop or if there's wheelchair access or not. And then this screenshot to the right is an example of how this GTFS static data looks in the Virginia Trip Planner. I just chose to have my starting point at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, noted by the green pin, and the end location here at the office at 600 East Main Street. And so when I put in my starting point and my destination, I get a list of potential rides. So I can see I can take the 5 bus, the BRT Pulse, a different 5 bus, or I could take the 77 and transfer to the 14. And so if I were to click on the 5, this gives step-by-step directions. So leave the VMFA at 11:33 and walk for about 10 minutes to Cary and Shepherd, where I will get on the 5 bus for 14 stops until I get to 6th and Cary, and then I will walk another 2 blocks to my final destination. And so, as you can see, this provides stop times based on the planned schedule, but it doesn't account for if a particular run has a delay, and that's where GTFS real-time comes in. This is an extension of GTFS that integrates with the static schedule and automated vehicle locator technologies such as Swiftly, Passio, or Clever devices. And it can provide trip updates, vehicle positions, and service alerts for riders. Things like if a particular station is closed for maintenance or a route is detoured because of road construction, any type of delays, things like this. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but adding real-time updates really improves the rider experience just by taking some guesswork out of transit. And then for the third flex option we're talking about, or the third GTFS option we're talking about today, is GTFS Flex, which this is the latest addition to the GTFS family. It was launched in 2024 and enables flexible transit options to be incorporated into online trip planners. It builds off of the static GTFS data with additional text files and fields to note the zone nature of this kind of transit. And it captures the following information. So the service area, this would be the boundaries of, say, a microtransit service zone or demand response service zone, or a buffered area for paratransit. It also includes operating days and hours. So what are the days of the operation? What time is the first pickup? What time is the last drop off? The holiday schedule. Any eligibility rules. So can anybody ride, or do riders need to be verified? And if so, how does that work? And booking rules. So how to book and where to book. And so again, on the right here is a screenshot from the Virginia Trip Planner. I know Bay Transit's Flex Feed is in here, so I chose my starting point as the Bethpage Camp Resort in Urbana, and I wanted to go to Rappahannock Community College. And so as you can see, there is no fixed route option here. However, there are a variety of Bay Transit programs that serve this area. And so when I first clicked on New Freedom, it contained the eligibility information, which said it's only for people with individuals with disabilities or over 60. So I clicked out of that and kept looking, and then I clicked on Bay Transit, the one that's selected here, and this just provides, it has nothing about eligibility, so it's open to the public, and it has the information to call to schedule a trip 24 hours ahead of my planned departure. And so having the flex feeds, I think the Virginia Trip Planner is one of the few statewide trip planners that has all of this information in one place, and it's just super helpful for users and the general public and anybody who is just interested in learning more about how to use transit. And so now that I have covered those, I think we're going to pause for questions before Wood takes over to talk about some potential uses and implementations of GTFS.
And I think questions are through the Q&A module. While people have an opportunity to type in some questions, I wanted to mention that one of the great things about the GTFS spec is it's under active development. So kind of as our industry evolves and changes, and as the needs evolve and change, the spec continues to get updated and new fields and new features added. For example, stop information is an area that's been expanding in terms of the fields and what data can be stored in a GTFS file associated with a stop, which is providing opportunities to convey more rich information out to the riders, but also for a planning perspective, it's a way that we can really hone in improvements related to the passenger experience.
Grace and Wood, we have one question. I'm going to use my authority and ask my own question first, very briefly. And this is just because I'm a nerd. Have y'all ever looked at, like, what's the furthest distance in Virginia utilizing transit, like between the 2 points, or utilizing all the services within the trip planner model, like getting from Alexandria to Lynchburg, or utilizing kind of the local transit, the either Virginia Breeze or Amtrak, and then the local transit on the other side, of figuring out like what's the furthest you can go from any 2 points in the Commonwealth using transit. That's just, that would be pretty interesting.
That's a great question. I don't think we've tried to do the state Guinness Book of World Records and figure out the furthest. But a couple of weeks ago, one of our colleagues did use the trip planner to plan a SOV free trip traveling from here in Richmond to Portsmouth for the Virginia APA conference via Amtrak and via HRT and GRTC. So that's an example of it kind of being used in the real world, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, the governor's conference is in October. So like, what a great way to kind of put on there, like get to the governor's conference via, these transit and these inner cities connected together and say, versus the parking deck is right here.
That's a great point.
So I will ask the first official question. My apologies for interrupting you with my nonsense. Does GTFS also show ridership information? I am asking this, very important information required for any new transit service or any major changes or headways. If not, how do you include ridership within GTFS?
So the spec does not include ridership information. It doesn't take into account like vehicle loading or the number of people that are on a transit bus or a car at any one given time. There are other systems that do that, but they're currently not fully integrated with the spec isn't fully integrated with those systems. So normally that data has to be captured and analyzed kind of in parallel to the GTFS, but it is associated with a route and a stop normally, so that data can be manipulated in something like a GIS tool to conduct analysis. But they are two distinct data sources at this time.
And then another question is, how far are we from this data, including stuff like Flex, being broadly taken up in the typical trip planners like Google and Apple Maps, rather than needing to develop a separate tool?
That's a great question. And I think that's one that's more aimed at those data providers. I think they're working towards that, but I wouldn't be able to indicate a timeline or an understanding of where they are in that process.
And then I know you discussed kind of fare prices. Could this tool also be used to implement kind of singular fare, or at least understanding, if you're transferring Metro bus to Alexandria Dash or vice versa, as you plan your trip, understanding what you need to complete from point A to all the way point Z?
Yes, if an agency charges fares and provides the fare information, the spec does allow that information to be stored, and then for the end user to see that information. So I believe in Google Maps, it'll tell you how much a trip would cost kind of on the individual modes themselves or the trip segments.
Thank you.
And like with anything computing, what is the saying? Garbage in, garbage out. So the more data and the more accurate the data that is included in the GTFS feed, the more accurate and better and more useful the feed is for, the variety of users. If it's planners using it to plan and evaluate transit, if it's riders using it to evaluate, to make a choice of riding. One of the areas I mentioned that stops is kind of a newer area. There's an indication about that stop's accessibility that can now be included in the spec. So if you have somebody that is mobility impaired that's riding, that information can be really critical in the way that they end up planning their trip on our systems. They might go one stop further than the closest stop to their destination because that stop provides ADA accommodation or something like that.
I think that's all the questions we have.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to take things over from here. I'm going to have Grace advance the slides for me so we don't have to change slides. So Grace, go ahead and advance to the next slide. So touching on how we leverage GTFS. This is something that has evolved as we have gotten more technically savvy internally and as the spec has developed and as we've rolled out our technical assistance. But a couple ways that we've been really using this is, the first off is mapping. One of the ways that DRPT has been putting this to work is we created a statewide transit map. That was like the first thing that we really attempted to do with GTFS, was to help us and stakeholders be able to answer the question, where is transit in Virginia? We now maintain that map, and it's available through our open data portal with regular updates that we extract from the GTFS feeds. It is a great visual representation that's evolved to show where transit exists in the Commonwealth. Most recently, we have updated it to include microtransit zones. Microtransit is a service that doesn't operate like fixed route. It's kind of more a hybrid between demand response and like Uber. So technology-driven demand response. The example on the screen actually shows the microtransit zones here in Richmond, and that's something that we've leveraged to include in our statewide transit map. Other things that we've leveraged is for several years, DRPT has procured Remix, which is a planning suite of tools that really leverages GTFS and provides some tools for GTFS management that I'll talk about a little later. Additionally, performance analysis, specifically we use it when we're reporting on our VTrans performance measures, and VTrans is the statewide transportation plan here in Virginia. Additionally, as of late, since 2023, NTD reporting, so this is transit agency reporting to the National Transit Database, has included a requirement for GTFS, just the basic information to be included in that reporting. And we at DRPT have been actively engaged in supporting our 5311 agencies in meeting that requirement, because we facilitate their reporting to the National Transit Database. An additional area is Smart Scale, which is a Virginia-specific program for how we prioritize kind of funding larger transportation projects here in the Commonwealth. We leverage GTFS data when we are evaluating projects and scoring projects that have transit components. Additionally, DRPT and its partners at OIP and VDOT do a before and after analysis when it comes to scoring projects, and we've relied a lot on GTFS data to efficiently be able to evaluate projects, because it's a good representation of what's been implemented and how it's been implemented and how it's been designed. And lastly, we've really flexed it for planning, whether that's planning in-house on a statewide level, or that's planning where we're working directly with our transit agencies on things like transit development plans and transit strategic plans. And lastly, an area that we've leveraged more and more is just data information sharing. Making this data available and getting it into the hands of the people that can analyze it and use it for some, new and creative ways. One example is a project up in the Northern Virginia, DC metropolitan area called RM3P that leverages some of our GTFS data for the dynamic incentivization project that they have going on up there. So let's go ahead and switch slides. Thanks, Grace. So continuing on the same thing, complete and accurate GTFS information can be used for a lot of different things on the agency level. So developing timetables is a thing that GTFS is really, really great for. There are a lot of tools out there that can help this process, but once you have a timetable in GTFS form, it can be leveraged to launch web and interactive timetables and mapping. It can be leveraged to create highly effective and easy to use print maps for things like shelters or kiosks. That planning and evaluating transit piece, as I mentioned, we have this procurement of Remix, and at its core, Remix relies on the GTFS information to enable planning and evaluation and analysis of routes, schedules, timetables, even doing some blocking and scheduling. It can be leveraged to store the stop information and conduct stop inventory. There are newer tools that are being developed to facilitate that, but it is a way to have kind of a centralized point of information storage and information sharing. And it can be flexed to allow collaboration with stakeholders in the public. So there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of really good uses for the GTFS spec at the statewide and the agency level. Grace, let's go to the next slide. DRPT, as Grace mentioned, has been providing direct technical assistance through a statewide contract with Trillium and Optibus to develop and maintain GTFS static and flex feeds. This is state-supported technical assistance and is available to our rural and small urban agencies. A lot of agencies have taken us up on this technical assistance and work very closely with Trillium on the maintenance of their published GTFS feeds. And we just wanted to call out that if you already are in that program, when you're making updates to your routes or timetables, please communicate those to Trillium. The blue box on the screen kind of provides a little refresher and instructions on how to do that. As I mentioned earlier, one of our goals is to really make sure the data is as accurate as possible. And one of the ways that we can achieve that is by getting changes into the GTFS feeds in a relatively timely manner. And that also helps people be able to find, plan, and accurately use the information for making decisions about their trips within their daily lives. So next slide, please. Just wanted to highlight some of those tools and resources that we have out there. We have this clearinghouse. This provides those deep links to those GTFS feeds statewide. So those are feeds that are available directly from a transit agency or feeds that are maintained as part of that contract with Trillium Optibus. This portal is primarily a source if you are looking to conduct research, if you want to download the actual GTFS feeds and implement them, or if you're looking to connect innovative tools to GTFS and have those those tools access the data. It is available publicly on that website. Additionally, our GIS team does a really good job making taking GTFS data and turning it into native formats that can be used in spatial planning tools such as the ArcGIS software suite. This is especially useful for folks like MPOs that are doing long-range transportation planning, or localities that are looking to do comp planning and want to have accurate information about where transit is in their communities. Next slide, please. So mentioned Remix a couple times, just wanted to highlight kind of what that is and what's available. Mentioned that we have a statewide procurement and contract of Remix that provides access to the Remix platform to Virginia transit agencies and consultants doing work on behalf of Virginia transit agencies at no cost to the agency. We provide access to 2 of the modules within Remix, that is Transit Planning Core and then Microtransit / on-demand planning. The platform leverages GTFS to map, analyze, and plan route services in areas. Perform scheduling, run cutting, and blocking are additional features that can be done in the system. It also has a lot of tools that are aimed at improving the way we do public outreach and engagement. You can do things like modify a route and publish that information in a way that people then can interact with your proposed modified route and make comments right on the screen, or make a modification to a route and print that out and then circulate it, or it also provides ways to do quick and dirty maps for things like rerouting or just understanding who are your riders and what the demographics are of different transit services and lines. If you want to learn more about Remix and our Virginia Transit Agency, feel free to reach out to me or any of your contacts at DRPT, and we're happy to share more information about how that tool can be leveraged within your transit-related workflows. So next slide, please. I want to touch on a few free resources that Grace and I have used over the years when it comes to leveraging GTFS data. I wanted to mention that one thing that a lot of agencies do as part of their workflows is make changes, update their GTFS, and then need to, republish route schedules and timetables. There's a great tool, free tool available that allows for that to be done easily and convert those GTFS feeds into HTML. And the key there is you can take these files and put them on your website, and people can interact with them and engage in a timetable that is far, far, far beyond a scanned copy of a PDF that is not even searchable. So I wanted to give at the end of this, I'll actually give a little demonstration of what this tool looks like in terms of interacting with one of the outputs. But just wanted to throw that out there as a resource that can be really helpful in the way you can leverage GTFS. Next slide. So additionally, free tools, shout out to National RTAP, who's been involved in the GTFS spec for quite a while. And they built a GTFS builder tool that's free for anybody to use. They provide some limited technical support on how to use it, but it's a tool that doesn't require a lot of the fancy softwares or GIS or anything like that. It's a tool that relies on Excel, which is something most agencies have access to. So for smaller agencies, this can be a real good entry point into developing GTFS feeds, and just wanted to make it available and flag it as a resource. So with that, I think that kind of comes to the end of our presentation part. I'm happy to kind of throw in that demonstration as people maybe type some questions into the chat for us. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So here you can see on screen is a map, and on the left it has like a key, and this is, as I scroll through this is actually going to change, and this is taking the GTFS feeds from Petersburg and uploading them and processing them through the system. So you can interact and you can kind of see this map move around and highlight those routes. But if I click on one of those routes, it's going to change the view and then provide the exact time.
We can't see your screen.
Oh no. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, so let's go back. So, okay, here's that front screen. Here's that side menu, and you can see how I'm interacting with all of these different routes within Petersburg. And if I click on one of those routes, it then takes me to a page that provides kind of that single route summary map, but also the timetable at those time points. And then some basic information being pulled out of the feed about when the services don't operate. So this is something that can be uploaded and added to folks' websites, and you can maintain it and update it with relative ease and get up and running with kind of an interactive schedule in a matter of minutes. Actually much faster than you could even, put this data into Excel and then draw maps and format them in something like PowerPoint. So if you're interested in learning more or want a hands-on demonstration of this, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to kind of share what I've learned and what I know about this tool and how it works. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and return to the webinar.
Oh, okay. And we have a handful of questions. Do you know the percentage of agencies doing GTFS for NTD purposes that have data and shape to be consumed by trip planners? Is it a large learning curve to go from the basic required to what you need to be in the hands of travelers?
In Virginia, I think we have almost 100% coverage for of GTFS that is available on trip plan or in a condition that works with trip planners. Any of the feeds that we support maintenance and development of through Trillium, they work directly with the main player in the temporal search, which is Google, to get those feeds approved and kept relatively updated in the Google environment. Another big one is the transit app. They consume a lot of the data that is published on our clearinghouse as well.
I guess just to add on to that question, the 7 required text files that I mentioned in the static feeds, that is all you need to be consumed by a trip planner. You know, the more the better, but as long as you have those 7 required, which is part of the NTD requirement, that also is enough to be in the hands of riders. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Is there a national organization acting as a clearinghouse for statewide, I guess, GTFS best practices?
So I know mobilitydata.org they're the steward of GTFS data, and I think that would be a good resource to look at any best practices. GTFS.org was another resource that I used just coming up with this presentation, and so I would recommend checking both of those out.
And we have participated in the mobility data meetings and information sharing and collaborations.
Okay, excellent. Will this work with cell phones? Was another question.
Absolutely. It's platform agnostic, and one of the really nice things about this is we're not developing an app. We're allowing the people that are experts in developing apps and to access that data and use it in those apps, because everybody hates having to download an app now for everything. So getting the data in the hands of where everybody is, and everybody's on search and everybody's searching on a limited number of search engines. So making sure that information is there is the most effective way of getting that information in front of everybody's eyeballs.
Absolutely. Having a million apps for a million different things is getting quite annoying.
Yeah.
Do you know if Remix is available for MPOs?
MPOs can gain access to Remix in support of their transit agencies, and I would suggest if an MPO is interested in that, they can reach out to me directly, and I can facilitate that process.
Okay. And the final question is my own is, do you know, having used the system, it's fairly incredible, how many Virginians have access to transit, kind of overlaying the GTFS data of routes and bus stops and microtransit with, you know, kind of census data of, I think that's just a great metric of kind of the work that DRPT does, that VTA does, that all of our colleagues kind of keeping our measuring stick of, you know, how many Virginians are within walking distance of a bus stop and a route. Is just something, and I don't know if y'all have ever done that before and kind of measured how many folks have access with these kind of tools coming online and making it much easier than looking at a map and trying to draw it and guesstimate.
We actually did do this for the VTrans before and after. We went on Remix and did a quick analysis using the demand response areas and the GTFS data overlaid with the census to get like kind of a hard number on the access throughout the state, though I can't remember exactly what it was because this was a couple months ago.
And one of the nice things about the GTFS data is when it's analyzed in detail, because it includes that frequency information, you can really look at both spatial and temporal access to transit. to get a much better. You know, you might have the people that might have access to transit once every 90 minutes is far higher than the people that have access to transit once every 15 minutes.
Absolutely. And that would be fantastic to know as well. You know, just kind of measuring ourselves of how we're improving and doing the work to make everybody's lives a little bit better. And then, you know, on the bus stops, I love the accessibility. You know, having worked on the bus stop bill and the shelters and everything, I think, you know, including that data just makes it easier and more comfortable for folks to get on there as long as they, you know, kind of know what they're getting into and what they're looking for. That is all the questions that we have. So thank you very much, Grace and Wood, for your great presentation today. See everybody in October when we discuss the 5311 program and its impacts on our transit system. And I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you again.
Grace, do you want to throw up the contact information card just real quick in case people want to jot anything down?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was up this entire time.
There's our contact information if anybody needs it. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you again, Wood and Grace. Have a great day.